The radio crackled to life at 3:47 hours, cutting through the pre-dawn silence of Bagram Airfield like a blade through fabric. Major Kowalski's voice, usually steady as granite, carried an edge that made every soul in the tower freeze mid-motion. "Tower, this is Warthog 7. I've got a problem up here." The words hung in the Afghan air like smoke from a funeral pyre, heavy with implications none of them wanted to consider. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, pulling his third consecutive night shift, leaned forward into his headset. 22 years old, fresh from technical school, he'd handled hundreds of routine check-ins. This wasn't routine. Static filled the pause before Kowalski's voice returned, rougher now, fighting against something the tower couldn't see. "Tower, Warthog 7 is combat ineffective. I'm missing my canopy, port engine is throwing metal, and I've got hydraulic fluid painting my cockpit red." The operations center erupted into controlled chaos. Colonel Martinez, base commander, appeared as if materializing from the shadows themselves, still fastening his flight suit. His weathered face, carved by 3 decades of military service, betrayed nothing as he absorbed the impossible scenario unfolding through the radio waves. Major Valentina Viper Kowalski, call sign earned through precision strikes that had become legend among ground troops, was flying a dying machine through hostile airspace. Rodriguez's hands trembled as he keyed the mic. "Warthog 7, state your position and intentions." The pause stretched into eternity. When Kowalski's voice returned, it carried something that chilled everyone listening, not fear but resignation wrapped in steel resolve. "Tower, I'm approximately 15 clicks northeast of your position. Altitude Angels, 5 and descending. I've got friendlies trapped in a valley below taking effective fire. I'm making another gun run." Colonel Martinez grabbed the radio with force that nearly snapped the cable. "Negative, Warthog 7. You are ordered to return to base immediately. Your aircraft is not mission capable." The silence that followed spoke volumes about the woman flying that broken thunderbolt. Everyone in that tower knew Viper Kowalski's story. The pilot who'd clawed her way up from maintenance crew to the cockpit of the Air Force's most feared ground attack aircraft, facing down skeptics who claimed women couldn't handle the Warthog's brutal recoil. "Sir," came her reply, voice steady as mountain stone, "respectfully, those Marines don't have 15 minutes to wait for another bird." The radio clicked off, leaving only the haunting whistle of desert wind through the tower's windows, and the collective held breath of everyone who understood what they'd just witnessed, a pilot choosing duty over survival. The base erupted into motion as emergency crews scrambled to prepare for whatever might limp home. 36 hours earlier, Major Kowalski had been just another pilot in the squadron briefing room, her compact frame dwarfed by the towering figures of her male counterparts. Captain Bulldog Stevens, built like a linebacker and possessing the subtle charm of a sledgehammer, had been holding court near the coffee station. His voice carried across the room with deliberate volume, ensuring everyone could hear his assessment of the morning's mission assignments. "I see they've got Viper taking close air support again," Stevens announced, stirring sugar into his coffee with theatrical precision. "Hope those Marines down there aren't counting on any real firepower. We all know the A-10 responds better to a firm hand." His cronies chuckled appreciatively, the kind of laughter that dies quickly when someone realizes the subject of their mockery is standing within earshot. Kowalski didn't turn around. She continued studying her mission parameters on the tablet before her, fingers tracing flight paths with the methodical precision of someone who'd done this dance hundreds of times before. Her silence spoke louder than any retort could have. She'd learned long ago that responding to Stevens only fed his need for attention and validation from peers who mistook volume for competence. Lieutenant Commander Hayes, the squadron intelligence officer, cleared his throat and began the formal briefing. The large screen at the front of the room flickered to life, displaying satellite imagery of the Kunar province's treacherous mountain terrain. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have reports of increased Taliban activity in Grid Square 77 Alpha. A Marine reconnaissance unit has been tracking a high-value target believed to be coordinating attacks on coalition supply routes. The room fell silent as Hayes continued, his pointer tracing red zones across the digital map. Intelligence suggests this target has been moving weapons caches through these mountain passes under cover of darkness. The Marines need close air support to establish observation posts and potentially engage if the situation develops. His eyes found Kowalski's across the room. "Major, you'll be providing overwatch for Call Steel Rain. They're good Marines, but they'll be operating in terrain that offers limited extraction options if things go sideways." Kowalski nodded once, her expression unchanged. She'd flown support for Steel Rain before, a tight unit led by Staff Sergeant Maria Santos, a combat veteran whose reputation for bringing her people home rivaled Kowalski's own precision in the air. The partnership between the two women had become something of a legend among the enlisted ranks, though it drew continued skepticism from old guard officers who questioned whether either belonged in their respective roles. Stevens leaned back in his chair, arms crossed over his chest in a posture that screamed disapproval. "Seems like a job that might require multiple gun runs. Sure, the Warthog can handle that kind of sustained engagement." The question hung in the air like cordite smoke, loaded with implication and doubt. Hayes's response cut through the tension with bureaucratic efficiency. "Major Kowalski has the highest mission success rate in the squadron. Steel Rain specifically requested her for overwatch." The words landed with the weight of fact, silencing Stevens and his supporters effectively. The pre-flight ritual began before dawn, as it always did. Kowalski walked her aircraft inspection with the thoroughness of a surgeon examining a patient before surgery. Her hands traced the A-10's distinctive lines, the twin engines mounted high on the fuselage, the massive GAU-8 cannon that formed the aircraft's beating heart, the titanium bathtub that surrounded the cockpit like armor plating. This particular Warthog, tail number 780691, had become her personal chariot over 18 months of combat operations. The ground crew, led by Technical Sergeant Robinson, moved around the aircraft with choreographed precision. Robinson, a 20-year veteran who'd maintained attack aircraft since the Gulf War, possessed an almost mystical understanding of the A-10's temperament. He caught Kowalski's eye as she completed her walk-around inspection, giving her the subtle thumbs-up that meant her bird was ready to hunt. "She's purring like a kitten, Major," Robinson called out, his voice carrying over the whine of auxiliary power units spinning up across the flight line. "Port engines running a little rough, but nothing that should cause problems. I've got the hydraulics topped off and your gun loaded with the good stuff, high-explosive incendiary mixed with armor-piercing. Whatever you find out there won't enjoy the conversation." Kowalski pulled on her helmet, feeling the familiar weight settle across her shoulders like an old friend's embrace. The morning air carried the scent of jet fuel and possibility, mixed with the ever-present dust that defined life in Afghanistan. She'd flown from this same spot 127 times before, each mission blending into the next, until they formed a tapestry of controlled violence and precision strikes that had earned her respect from ground forces across the theater. Stevens emerged from the squadron building, his own flight gear pristine and regulation perfect. His aircraft sat on the adjacent hardstand, polished to mirror shine by a ground crew that seemed more concerned with appearance than function. The contrast wasn't lost on anyone watching. Kowalski's Warthog bore the scars of combat missions, scorched paint where enemy fire had come too close, patches where maintenance crews had welded new metal over old wounds. "Try not to scratch the paint, Viper," Stevens called out, his voice carrying the kind of forced joviality that masked genuine contempt. "Some of us still care about aircraft appearance standards." His comment drew snickers from the handful of pilots gathering for the morning launch, the kind of laughter that dies quickly when professionalism reasserts itself. Kowalski didn't respond. She simply climbed the ladder into her cockpit, settling into the ejection seat with movements practiced through thousands of hours of flight time. Her hands moved across switches and controls with muscle memory precision, bringing the twin turbofans to life with a sound like controlled thunder. The mission would be routine: overwatch, reconnaissance, and on-call close air support if Steel Rain encountered resistance. What none of them could predict was how routine would transform into legend before the sun reached its zenith. The Kunar province stretched below like a moonscape carved by angry gods, all sharp ridges and shadowed valleys that had swallowed armies throughout history. Kowalski's A-10 carved through the morning air at 8,000 feet, her engines maintaining the distinctive whistle that had earned the aircraft its Warthog nickname. The heads-up display painted a green-tinted picture of the world ahead, waypoints and navigation data overlaying the harsh beauty of Afghanistan's mountains. "Steel Rain, this is Warthog 7 on station," Kowalski transmitted, her voice professional and calm. "I've got eyes on your position and clear skis for now. How copy?" The radio crackled with static before Staff Sergeant Santos's voice came through, carrying the controlled tension of someone operating in hostile territory. "Warthog 7, Steel Rain. Good to have you overhead, Major. We're moving into position to establish Overwatch Point Charlie. Intelligence reports enemy movement in the valley below, possibly weapons cache transfer in progress. We could use your eyes in the sky to confirm before we commit to the hillside." Santos's voice carried the weight of command and the careful respect of someone who understood the value of professional air support. Kowalski banked her aircraft into a gentle orbit, scanning the terrain below through both her naked eye and the aircraft's targeting systems. The valley Santos had mentioned appeared quiet, but Afghanistan had taught her that quiet often preceded violence. Thermal imaging revealed heat signatures that could be vehicles or could be rocks warming in the morning sun. The mountains held their secrets jealously. "Steel Rain, I'm showing possible vehicle movement grid 77 Alpha, approximately 2 clicks north of your position. Count 3, maybe 4 heat signatures in convoy formation. Recommend you hold position while I investigate." Kowalski adjusted her flight path, bringing the A-10 into a wide circle that would keep the suspected convoy under observation while maintaining sufficient altitude to avoid small arms fire. The minutes ticked by with the slow precision of a Swiss watch, each second bringing potential contact closer. Through her canopy, Kowalski watched the sun climb higher, burning away the morning shadows that had concealed enemy movement. The landscape revealed itself gradually, like a photograph developing in a darkroom, and what it revealed made her blood run cold. Below, in the valley, Santos's Marines were preparing to overlook. A convoy of vehicles had halted near what appeared to be a cave complex. Men moved with military precision, unloading crates and equipment with the practiced efficiency of professionals. This wasn't a routine weapons transfer. This was something bigger, more coordinated, more dangerous than intelligence had predicted. "Steel Rain, Warthog 7. You need to see this. I'm counting approximately 20 personnel, 5 vehicles, and what appears to be significant ordnance being moved into cave positions. This looks like a permanent installation, not a temporary cache." Kowalski's voice remained steady, but her grip on the stick tightened imperceptibly. She'd seen similar setups before, staging areas for major operations against coalition forces. Santos's response came quickly, tension evident even through radio static. "Warthog 7, Steel Rain copies. We're in position but need confirmation on threat level before we can call for additional support. Can you get closer for positive identification?" The question hung in the air between them, both women understanding the risk involved in bringing the A-10 within range of coordinated enemy fire. Kowalski checked her altitude and airspeed, calculating angles of attack and escape routes with the split-second precision that separated living pilots from dead heroes. "Steel Rain, stand by. I'm going down for a closer look. Keep your heads down and be ready to paint targets if this goes sideways." She pushed the stick forward, beginning a controlled descent that would bring her within effective range of enemy weapons, and them within range of her GAU-8 cannon. The morning had been routine. It was about to become anything but. At 6,000 feet, the world below resolved into sharp focus through Kowalski's targeting system. What she saw made her stomach clench with recognition born of experience and instinct. The cave complex wasn't just a weapons cache. It was a command center, complete with communication equipment, and what appeared to be surface-to-air missile launchers being assembled with methodical precision. "Steel Rain, Warthog 7. We've got a problem," she transmitted, banking hard left to maintain her surveillance orbit while staying outside the engagement envelope of shoulder-fired missiles. "I'm looking at SAM's sites under construction, and enough personnel to indicate this is a major staging area. Recommend immediate withdrawal to safe distance while we call for backup." Santos's voice came back tight with controlled urgency. "Warthog 7, negative on withdrawal. My Marines are observing what appears to be prisoner transfer. I count 3 individuals in coalition uniforms being moved into the cave complex. We cannot withdraw without confirmation of their status." The situation crystallized in Kowalski's mind like ice forming on a windshield. Prisoners changed everything. Rules of engagement, response protocols, and acceptable risk levels all shifted when American lives hung in the balance. She'd trained for this scenario but prayed she'd never face it. The ethical calculus was brutal and simple. Risk many to save few, or abandon few to preserve many. "Steel Rain, can you confirm prisoner status and nationality?" Kowalski asked, already knowing the answer would complicate an already impossible situation. Her aircraft continued its orbit, the twin engines maintaining their distinctive howl while she processed tactical options that ranged from bad to catastrophic. "Warthog 7, unable to confirm specifics, but uniform patterns and body language suggest American personnel under duress. Request immediate close air support to suppress enemy positions while we attempt rescue." Santos's transmission carried the weight of command decision and moral obligation, the kind of choice that defined military careers and haunted consciences. Kowalski felt the familiar calm settle over her, the combat mindset that transformed fear into focus and uncertainty into decisive action. She'd made this transition 127 times before, but it never became routine. Each time, she surrendered part of herself to the machine and the mission, trusting training and instinct to guide her through whatever came next. "Steel Rain, Warthog 7 beginning attack run. Mark your positions with colored smoke and stay down until I'm off target. This is going to be loud." She pushed the throttles forward and began her descent, the A-10 transforming from surveillance platform into instrument of precision violence. The GAU-8 cannon's targeting system painted enemy positions with electronic crosshairs, each one representing a decision about life and death. The first indication of trouble came as a flash of light from the cave complex, followed by the distinctive contrail of a surface-to-air missile climbing toward her aircraft with malevolent purpose. Training took over as Kowalski threw the A-10 into a defensive spiral, deploying chaff and flares while fighting to maintain enough stability for weapon delivery. The missile passed close enough that she could see its fins through the canopy, close enough to feel its heat signature through the aircraft's sensors. "Steel Rain, taking SAM fire. Beginning attack run now." Her voice remained steady even as the aircraft shuddered under G-forces that would have incapacitated civilians. The targeting reticle settled over the missile position just as a second launch flashed from another concealed site. This time, there would be no evasion. The world exploded in light and sound and chaos, and Major Valentina Kowalski discovered what it felt like to fly a dying machine through hostile skies. The A-18 missile detonated 20 feet above and behind Kowalski's aircraft, close enough to shower the A-10 with shrapnel that turned the rear fuselage into metallic lace. The blast wave hit like an invisible fist, slamming the aircraft sideways and setting off every warning system in the cockpit simultaneously. Alarms screamed their electronic warnings, while red lights painted the instrument panel like Christmas decorations from hell. Kowalski fought the controls as the A-10 rolled inverted, her world turning upside down in more ways than one. The stick felt sluggish, hydraulic fluid pressure dropping as damaged lines painted the cockpit interior with slick crimson spray. Through pure instinct and muscle memory, she managed to roll wings level, but the aircraft's handling characteristics had changed fundamentally. What had been responsive and predictable now felt like wrestling a wounded animal. "Warthog 7 is hit," she transmitted, her voice steady despite the chaos surrounding her. Professional training overrode personal fear as she ran through emergency procedures with mechanical precision. "Port engine is damaged, hydraulics compromised but still flight capable. Continuing attack run." The decision was instinctive. Santos's Marines were still pinned down, and those prisoners weren't going to rescue themselves. The GAU-8 cannon spoke with its distinctive voice, a sound like the world's largest zipper being torn apart at supersonic speed. 30mm depleted uranium rounds streamed toward the cave complex at 3,900 rounds per minute, each projectile carrying the kinetic energy of a small artillery shell. The enemy missile position disappeared in a cloud of pulverized rock and twisted metal, secondary explosions indicating ammunition stores had been ignited. But victory carried a price. As Kowalski pulled up from her attack run, a second missile site she hadn't spotted opened fire with a shoulder-launched Stinger. The infrared-seeking warhead tracked her port engine's heat signature with electronic persistence, climbing steadily toward its target while she threw the damaged aircraft into another desperate evasive spiral. This time, physics and probability conspired against her. The Stinger detonated against the port engine intake, sending turbine blades through the fuselage like metallic shrapnel. The engine died immediately, its distinctive whine replaced by the ominous sound of windmilling metal and escaping gases. Worse, the explosion had damaged the aircraft's primary flight control systems, leaving Kowalski flying on backup hydraulics and manual reversion. "Steel Rain, Warthog 7. I'm single engine and losing systems. How copy on prisoner extraction?" She banked the crippled aircraft around for another pass, ignoring the growing list of red warning lights and the acrid smell of burning electronics filling the cockpit. Through her damaged canopy, spiderwebbed by shrapnel but still intact, she could see muzzle flashes from the cave complex indicating continued enemy resistance. Santos's voice came back filled with professional admiration and personal concern. "Warthog 7, we have visual on 3 American personnel being moved deeper into the complex. Enemy forces are using them as human shields. Request precision fire on secondary positions only. Cannot risk civilian casualties." The tactical situation had devolved into a nightmare scenario that no amount of training could fully prepare anyone to handle. Kowalski circled her dying aircraft above the valley, calculating angles and probabilities while fighting systems that were failing with each passing second. The A-10 had been designed to absorb punishment and continue fighting, but it was approaching the limits of even its legendary durability. "Steel Rain, I've got one more gun run in me before I have to head home. Mark your closest friendly positions and give me specific targets. We're going to end this now." She rolled into her final attack, the single remaining engine straining to maintain airspeed while backup systems struggled to keep the aircraft controllable. What happened next would be discussed in military academies for decades to come. The world narrowed to crosshairs and target solutions as Kowalski lined up her final attack run. The damaged A-10 responded to control inputs like a wounded horse, requiring constant correction and compensation as she fought to maintain accurate weapon delivery parameters. Through her targeting system, she could see enemy fighters using the American prisoners as shields, their AK-47s trained on captives, while other weapons turned skyward toward her aircraft. "Steel Rain, I need those friendlies marked now," she transmitted, beginning her attack descent with single-engine power that barely maintained airspeed. The mathematical precision required for this shot exceeded anything she'd attempted before, threading ordnance between friendly and enemy positions separated by mere meters, while flying a battle-damaged aircraft through coordinated ground fire. Santos's voice crackled through the radio with desperate precision. Warthog 7, friendlies marked with purple smoke. Prisoners are 30 meters northwest of the smoke, enemy positions bracketing both groups. You've got a window approximately 10 meters wide for safe fire. The impossibility of the shot hung unspoken between them, threading that needle would require accuracy beyond human capability. Kowalski felt the familiar calm descend, the zone where time dilated and every detail crystallized with supernatural clarity. The targeting computer painted solutions across her heads-up display, while her hands made microscopic adjustments to keep the wounded aircraft stable. At 800 feet altitude and climbing through enemy fire, she squeezed the trigger and held it down. The GAU-8 cannon erupted in controlled fury, sending a stream of depleted uranium death precisely where she'd aimed it. The round struck enemy positions with surgical accuracy, each impact calculated to neutralize threats while avoiding civilian casualties by margins measured in inches. Secondary explosions rippled through the cave complex as ammunition stores detonated, the sound echoing off valley walls like artificial thunder. But success came at a cost that would haunt everyone involved. As Kowalski pulled up from her attack run, a hidden sniper's bullet found its mark. The armor-piercing round punched through the cockpit canopy directly in front of her face, spiderwebbing the entire transparency structure and sending glass fragments through the air like crystalline shrapnel. The impact was immediate and catastrophic. The canopy, already weakened by earlier battle damage, simply disintegrated under the combined stress of bullet impact and airflow pressure. At 200 knots airspeed, the destruction was instantaneous. One moment she was flying in an enclosed cockpit, the next she was exposed to the full fury of wind and debris at altitude. Warthog 7, what's your status? Santos's voice seemed to come from another universe as Kowalski fought to maintain control of an aircraft that was now essentially a flying convertible. The missing canopy created aerodynamic chaos, changing the A-10's handling characteristics yet again, while subjecting her to wind blasts that threatened to rip her from the ejection seat. Steel Rain, Warthog 7. I've lost my canopy and most of my instrument panel. Port engine is gone, starboard engine is running rough, and I'm losing hydraulic pressure fast. But your prisoners are free. I can see them moving toward your positions now. Her voice, transmitted through a helmet microphone being buffeted by 200-knot winds, carried the calm professionalism that had defined her entire career. The tactical situation was resolving successfully. Enemy resistance had collapsed under her precision fire. Steel Rain was moving to secure the rescued prisoners, and coalition reinforcements were inbound. But Kowalski's personal situation had deteriorated beyond recovery options. Flying a battle-damaged A-10 without a canopy was challenging enough. Doing it with failing engines and compromised flight controls bordered on impossible. All stations, this is Warthog 7, she transmitted, beginning the slow climb away from the valley floor. Mission accomplished. American personnel are secure and enemy positions are neutralized. I'm heading home. The simple words carried weight that everyone listening understood. She was attempting to fly an unflyable aircraft back to base through sheer force of will and professional competence. The legend of Viper Kowalski's impossible flight was about to begin. Climbing through 4,000 feet with a single engine and no canopy, Kowalski discovered that flying had become a test of endurance against physics itself. The wind blast at cruise speed created a maelstrom inside the cockpit that made every control input a monumental effort. Her helmet visor, designed for pressurized flight, fogged repeatedly as temperature variations played havoc with the anti-fog coating. Instruments, those that remained functional, became difficult to read through the constant vibration and airflow turbulence. The remaining engine, stressed beyond design limits by single-engine operation at combat power settings, began showing signs of impending failure. Exhaust gas temperatures climbed into the red zone, while oil pressure fluctuated ominously. She reduced power to conserve the engine, accepting lower airspeed and rate of climb in exchange for the possibility of making it home. Every mile became a victory against probability and mechanical limitation. Bagram Tower, this is Warthog 7 declaring emergency, she transmitted, her voice distorted by wind noise but remaining professionally calm. Single engine, no canopy, hydraulic failure, requesting priority handling and emergency equipment standing by. The words, delivered matter-of-factly, sent shockwaves through the base operations center where Colonel Martinez was coordinating the rescue effort. Warthog 7, Bagram Tower. Understand single engine and hydraulic emergency. Say your position and intentions. Rodriguez's voice carried professional concern mixed with personal admiration for what he was witnessing through radio communications. Everyone in the tower understood they were listening to something unprecedented. A pilot attempting to fly home in an aircraft that should have been abandoned hours ago. Tower, I'm approximately 25 nautical miles northeast, altitude 4,500 feet and maintaining. Airspeed 180 knots and steady. I'm going to try to bring her home, but I'll need every bit of runway you've got. Kowalski's assessment was delivered with mathematical precision, each parameter representing a battle won against aerodynamic forces that wanted to tear her aircraft apart. The base erupted into coordinated activity as emergency crews prepared for an arrival that defied conventional wisdom about aircraft survivability. Foam trucks positioned themselves along the runway while medical personnel established trauma stations. Everyone understood that what was attempting to return to Bagram had transcended normal definitions of aircraft and entered the realm of flying wreckage held together by pilot skill and determination. Colonel Martinez took the radio personally, his voice carrying 3 decades of command authority and genuine concern for one of his pilots. Warthog 7, this is Base Commander. You are cleared for straighten approach, runway 36. Emergency equipment is standing by and you have priority over all traffic. Bring her home, Major. Roger, Base Commander. Beginning approach now. It's been an honor serving with this squadron. Kowalski's response carried finality that made everyone listening understand they might be hearing her last transmission. She lined up for final approach, fighting controls that responded unpredictably while calculating glide angles and landing speeds for an aircraft that no longer matched any performance manual. What she accomplished over the next 12 minutes would be studied by test pilots and military aviators for generations, not just as an example of exceptional flying skill, but as testament to human determination in the face of impossible odds. The approach was a masterpiece of aviation artistry performed under conditions that would have challenged the most experienced test pilots. Without a canopy, Kowalski had no instrument protection from wind and debris, forcing her to fly primarily by visual reference and feel, as electronic displays became unreadable in the turbulent airflow. The single engine, running far beyond normal operational limits, provided barely enough power to maintain controlled flight. Warthog 7, you're looking good on approach. Winds are calm, visibility unlimited. Bring her down easy, Rodriguez transmitted, his voice steady despite the knot of tension in his stomach. Through binoculars, ground personnel could see the approaching A-10, or what remained of it, limping toward the runway with battle damage visible even at distance. The landing gear deployment became another crisis requiring split-second decision-making. With compromised hydraulics, gear extension was uncertain at best. Kowalski cycled the system 3 times before achieving partial deployment, main gear down and locked, nose gear showing unsafe indication. Landing with uncertain nose gear on a battle-damaged aircraft would normally result in ejection, but ejecting from an A-10 without a canopy created its own potentially fatal complications. Tower showing unsafe nose gear indication. Going to try landing anyway. Ejection isn't an option with no canopy. Her voice, still professionally calm despite the impossible situation, made the decision sound routine rather than desperately heroic. She adjusted her approach angle to minimize nose gear contact with the runway, planning to hold the nose high as long as possible during rollout. At 500 feet altitude, the engine finally surrendered to accumulated battle damage and stress. The sudden silence was deafening as windmilling propeller sounds replaced the steady whine of turbine operation. Kowalski now faced the ultimate test of piloting skill, deadstick landing of a battle-damaged aircraft with uncertain landing gear and no ejection seat option. Warthog 7 is going deadstick. Tower, I'm committed to this approach. Clear the runway and have medical standing by. She pushed the nose down to maintain airspeed, trading altitude for glide distance with calculations that had to be perfect on the first attempt. There would be no second chance, no go-around option, no margin for error. The ground rushed up with increasing speed as she crossed the runway threshold at 120 knots, faster than normal to compensate for control issues, but still within the A-10's landing envelope. The main gear contacted the runway with barely perceptible impact, testament to flying skill honed through thousands of hours of practice. She held the nose high, using aerodynamic drag to slow the aircraft while praying the nose gear would hold when it inevitably contacted the pavement. At 60 knots, gravity and aerodynamics finally overcame her ability to keep the nose airborne. The compromised nose gear contacted the runway with grinding metal sounds that carried across the entire airfield. Sparks flew as the partially deployed gear scraped along pavement, but the structure held together long enough for the aircraft to roll to a complete stop 2,800 feet down the 10,000-foot runway. Major Valentina Kowalski had accomplished the impossible, bringing home an unflyable aircraft through nothing but professional skill, determination, and refusal to surrender. Emergency crews surrounded the aircraft within seconds, but she waved them off long enough to complete her post-flight checklist, shutting down systems with the same methodical precision she'd maintained throughout the entire ordeal. When she finally climbed down from the cockpit, her legs nearly buckled from exhaustion and adrenaline depletion. Colonel Martinez was the first to reach her, his weathered face showing emotions that 3 decades of military service hadn't prepared him to process. "Major, that was the finest piece of flying I've witnessed in 30 years of military service. How the hell did you manage that landing?" His question carried genuine awe mixed with command authority, the tone of a senior officer recognizing exceptional performance under impossible conditions. Kowalski's response was vintage military understatement delivered with slight smile that didn't quite hide her own amazement at surviving the experience. "Sir, the A-10 is a tough old bird. She wanted to come home as much as I did." She looked back at the battle-scarred aircraft, its missing canopy and damaged engines testament to what they'd endured together. "Though I think she's earned a rest." Within hours, word of the impossible flight had spread throughout the coalition forces. Major Valentina "Viper" Kowalski, the maintenance crew member turned pilot who'd been doubted and dismissed by colleagues, had pulled off the most legendary flying performance in recent military history. But more importantly, 3 American prisoners were alive and free, because she'd refused to abandon her mission when her aircraft was shot apart around her. The story was far from over. What happened next would transform skeptics into believers and cement a legacy that would inspire military aviators for generations to come. The debriefing room at Bagram fell silent as Kowalski recounted the technical details of her impossible flight. Colonel Martinez sat at the head of the conference table, flanked by intelligence officers, maintenance chiefs, and squadron commanders who'd come to understand they were documenting something unprecedented in military aviation history. Her measured recital of facts, engine parameters, hydraulic pressures, control responses, transformed the supernatural into the technical, but somehow made it even more remarkable. "At what point did you consider ejection, Major?" asked Colonel Martinez, his question cutting to the heart of every pilot's ultimate decision matrix. The room leaned forward collectively, understanding they were about to hear the reasoning behind a choice that had meant the difference between legend and tragedy. Kowalski's response came without hesitation, delivered with the same calm professionalism that had characterized her radio transmissions during the crisis. "Sir, ejection was never really an option once I lost the canopy. The seat-to-canopy clearance envelope becomes compromised without proper canopy jettison, and the risk of impact injury during egress exceeded the risk of continuing the flight. Besides," she added with the first hint of emotion they'd seen, "Steel Rain needed those gun runs completed." Technical Sergeant Robinson, her crew chief, raised his hand tentatively. His 20 years of maintaining attack aircraft had given him deep appreciation for what machines could endure, but Kowalski's flight had redefined his understanding of aircraft limitations. "Major, I've been working on A-10 since Desert Storm, and I've never seen one take that kind of battle damage and continue flying. How did you maintain control authority with that level of hydraulic system compromise?" "Manual reversion and trim tabs," she replied matter-of-factly. "The aircraft was designed by people who understood that hydraulics fail and pilots still need to get home. It responds to control inputs, just requires more muscle and patience. The hardest part was compensating for asymmetric thrust after losing the port engine, but the A-10's design characteristics actually help with that." Captain Stevens, who'd been notably quiet throughout the debriefing, finally spoke up. His voice carried none of its usual swagger, replaced by something approaching humility. "Major, I owe you an apology. What you accomplished today. I don't know any pilot in this squadron who could have pulled that off. That was exceptional flying under impossible conditions." The admission hung in the air like smoke from a doused fire, acknowledgement of skills and determination that had transcended gender politics and personal prejudice. Kowalski's response was gracious without being condescending, professional without being cold. "Captain, we all serve the same mission. Today just happened to be my turn to find out what I was made of." Colonel Martinez stood up, his expression formal but his eyes warm with genuine respect. "Major, I'm recommending you for the Distinguished Flying Cross with Valor device. What you accomplished today, bringing home battle-damaged aircraft while completing a successful rescue mission, represents the finest traditions of military aviation. More importantly, 3 American servicemen are alive because you refused to quit when any reasonable person would have ejected." The room erupted.